The coffee machine hissed its familiar protest as I pressed the button for a double espresso, third one today, and it wasn't even noon yet. My reflection in the stainless steel surface looked tired. Dark circles I'd tried to cover with concealer. Hair pulled into a ponytail because I hadn't had time to wash it this morning. The collar of my university sweatshirt slightly frayed at the edges. 24 years old. 2 years post-divorce, and I was still measuring my life in caffeine units and hours until my next shift ended. The cafe where I worked part-time wasn't fancy. Just a neighborhood place near campus where students came to pretend their lattes were sophisticated and their conversations intellectual. I'd been here 9 months now, ever since I'd decided to go back to school and finish the degree I'd abandoned when I married Stellan at 22. That decision, marrying him, felt like it belonged to a different person entirely. A younger, more naive version of myself who'd mistaken intensity for love and control for protection. Luna, Table 7 needs their order. Sina's voice cut through my thoughts as she breezed past with a tray balanced expertly on one hand. She was 3 years older than me, studying graphic design, and had become something close to a friend in the way coworkers do when you spend 40 hours a week together, navigating the same chaos. I grabbed the cappuccinos I'd just finished making and headed to Table 7, weaving through the mid-morning crowd. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, sounds of indie music mixing with conversation, and the constant background noise of the espresso machine. My sneakers squeaked slightly on the tile floor. I'd been meaning to replace them, but textbooks were expensive, and rent was due next week. Table 7 was occupied by a young couple, probably undergrads, holding hands across the table like they'd invented romance. I set down their drinks with a practiced smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes but was professional enough that they'd tip decently. "Anything else I can get you?" I asked, already mentally calculating the 17 other tasks I needed to complete before my shift ended at 2. They shook their heads, too absorbed in each other to really see me, which was fine. Being invisible was a skill I'd perfected over the past 2 years. After leaving Stellan, I deliberately made myself small, unremarkable, easy to overlook. It was safer that way. Back behind the counter, I started wiping down surfaces that didn't really need it, a nervous habit I'd developed. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket, a text from Casper. "Still on for dinner tonight? 7 p.m.? I smiled despite my exhaustion. Casper was safe. An economics major I'd met in one of my business classes 3 months ago. Steady, predictable. The kind of guy who showed up when he said he would and didn't come with the weight of a criminal empire attached to his name. We weren't serious yet. Still in that early stage where everything was light and easy. But it was nice. Normal. Exactly what I needed. "Sounds perfect," I typed back. "Your place or mine?" The cafe door chimed, admitting a gust of October wind and 3 new customers. I looked up automatically, customer service smile already forming, and felt every muscle in my body lock into place. Stellan Christensen stood in the doorway. It had been 2 years since I'd seen him in person, 2 years since I'd walked out of his penthouse with nothing but a suitcase, and my dignity barely intact. But he looked exactly the same. Tall, imposing in a way that had nothing to do with his height. Dark blonde hair styled with that casual precision that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been painted on, white shirt with the top 3 buttons undone, in a way that was calculated to look effortless. His ice blue eyes scanned the cafe with the same methodical assessment I remembered, cataloging exits and threats and opportunities in the space of a breath. Then they found me. For 3 seconds, neither of us moved. The cafe sounds faded to white noise. I was 22 again, standing in his office for the first time, completely out of my depth, and not smart enough to know it yet. Then his mouth curved into that smile I'd once found irresistible, and now recognized as pure danger. He walked toward the counter with the kind of confidence that came from owning half the city and never having heard the word no in any context that mattered. Behind him, I could see Mikael Rasmussen, one of his men, still playing bodyguard after all this time, taking up a position by the door. My hands had started trembling, so I pressed them flat against the counter, forcing my face into neutral territory. Sina was watching from across the cafe, her expression alert in a way that suggested she'd picked up on the sudden tension. Stellan stopped directly in front of me, and I caught the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something darker, more expensive. A smell that triggered memories I'd spent 2 years trying to bury. Luna. My name in his voice, that slight Scandinavian accent making the vowels sound like a caress. It's been a while. I found my voice, and was proud that it only shook slightly. 2 years. I've been counting. His smile widened, but his eyes had that intensity I remembered. The kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the world until you realized you were actually prey being studied. You look well. University treating you right? Of course he knew I was back in school. Stellan made it his business to know things, especially about people who'd once belonged to him. The possessive thought made anger flare in my chest, burning away some of the fear. What do you want, Stellan? I kept my voice low, aware of the customers around us, of Sina's increasingly concerned glances. He tilted his head, studying me with that unreadable expression. Coffee to start, then we need to talk. No. The word came out sharper than intended. We don't need to do anything. You want coffee? I'll make it. But there's nothing to discuss. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or approval. Luna? Americano or espresso? I interrupted, reaching for a cup. My hands were steadier now, anger providing stability that fear couldn't. I'm working, as you can see, and I have a life now that doesn't include spontaneous conversations with my ex-husband. Ex-husband who's been watching you date that boy. His voice dropped lower, dangerous. Casper Madsen, economics major, 25, no criminal record, no outstanding debts, no interesting qualities whatsoever. Ice flooded my veins. Of course he'd been watching. Of course he knew about Casper. Privacy had never been a concept Stellan understood, not when it came to things he considered his. That boy, I said carefully, is none of your business. Nothing about my life is your business anymore. That was the point of the divorce. The divorce you demanded. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so only I could hear. The marriage you ran from, without giving me a chance to fix things. Fix things? I actually laughed, the sound bitter. Stellan, you can't fix a foundation that was broken from the start. I was 22. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. And now you do? He straightened, hands sliding into his pockets in that deceptively casual way that meant he was calculating his next move. Now, you're so wise and worldly at 24 that you're dating a boy who thinks taking you to chain restaurants is sophisticated? The condescension in his voice ignited something in me that had been dormant for 2 years. You know what? Yes. Yes, I am wiser now. Wise enough to know that a man who tracks my phone and investigates my boyfriend isn't someone I want in my life. Wise enough to understand that real love doesn't come with surveillance and control. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I never controlled you. You owned half the city, Stellan. You decided where we lived, who we saw, what was safe. Every decision ran through your empire first. I grabbed a cup, started making his Americano with sharp, precise movements. I was an accessory, a pretty thing to keep in your penthouse while you ran your business. I want more than that. You think that boy can give you more? He watched my hands move, and I hated that his attention still made my skin feel electric. He can't protect you. Can't give you the life you deserve. Maybe I don't need protection. Maybe I just need respect. I set the finished coffee down harder than necessary, liquid sloshing slightly. $5. He pulled out his wallet, leather, expensive, probably Italian, and placed a $100 bill on the counter. Keep the change. Consider it a tip for the honesty. I don't want your money. Too late. It's already yours. He picked up the coffee, took a deliberate sip, eyes never leaving mine. We need to talk, Luna. Really talk, not this dance we're doing. There's nothing to say. Then why are your hands shaking? I looked down and realized he was right. Despite my anger, despite my words, my hands were trembling against the counter. I curled them into fists, refusing to give him the satisfaction. That's fear, not interest, I said flatly. You walked into my workplace, demonstrated that you've been stalking me, and implied threats against my boyfriend. Forgive me if I'm not jumping at the chance for a reunion. Something shifted in his expression, the confident smile faltering for just a moment. It wasn't a threat, just information. In your world, information is a weapon. In every world, information is a weapon. I taught you that. He set down the coffee, leaned forward again. Dinner. One dinner. Neutral location. No men, no surveillance. Just you and me, talking like adults. I have dinner plans already. Tomorrow, then. No. Luna. The answer is no, Stellan. I stepped back from the counter, creating physical distance because emotional distance wasn't working. I'm not interested in nostalgia or closure or whatever you think you need. We're done. We've been done for 2 years. Please respect that enough to leave. He studied me for a long moment, and I forced myself to hold his gaze, to not look away first like I used to. Finally, he nodded slowly, picked up his coffee. You're different, he said quietly. Stronger. I had to be. You don't survive divorce from a man like you by staying soft. A ghost of a real smile crossed his face. No, I suppose not. He turned toward the door, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. For what it's worth, Luna, I'm proud of you. Going back to school, building your own life. You're becoming who you were supposed to be. The compliment was so unexpected, so genuine, that I didn't have a response ready. By the time I processed it, he was already walking toward the exit, Mikael falling into step behind him. Sina appeared at my elbow the moment the door closed. Who the hell was that? My ex-husband. I reached for the $100 bill, crumpling it in my fist. And hopefully, someone I'll never have to see again. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Men like Stellan Christensen didn't accept rejection. They regrouped, reassessed, and came back with different tactics. And despite everything, my anger, my fear, my hard-won independence, a small, stupid part of me wondered what he'd been about to say before I cut him off. My phone buzzed again. Casper, sending a photo of wine bottles with the caption, "Which one for tonight?" I stared at the image, at this normal, uncomplicated man who wanted nothing more than my company and didn't come with the weight of a criminal empire. Then I looked at the door where Stellan had exited and felt the familiar pull of something I'd spent 2 years trying to forget. 3 weeks passed before Stellan made his next move. 3 weeks where I convinced myself I'd handled the coffee shop confrontation perfectly, that I'd been strong and clear and had successfully closed that chapter of my life. 3 weeks where Casper and I settled into a comfortable rhythm, study dates, Netflix nights, sex that was pleasant if not earth-shattering. I should have known better. The first sign came on a Tuesday evening. I was leaving my business ethics class, backpack heavy with textbooks, mentally preparing for my shift at the cafe that started in an hour. My phone rang. Unknown number, which I normally wouldn't answer, but something made me pick up. Luna Nielsen? A woman's voice, professional, slightly warm. Speaking. This is Dr. Ellen Sorensen from the University Financial Aid Office. I'm calling about your student loan application. My stomach dropped. The application I'd submitted 3 months ago, been rejected for, had been appealing through every available channel. Did something change with my appeal? Actually, yes. An anonymous donor has established a scholarship fund, and based on your academic performance and financial need, you've been selected as a recipient. It covers full tuition for the remainder of your degree, plus a monthly stipend for living expenses. I stopped walking, students flowing around me like water around a stone. I'm sorry, what? Congratulations, Miss Nielsen. The funds will be available starting next semester. We'll need you to come in and sign some paperwork, but who's the donor? My voice came out sharper than intended. A pause. Anonymous, as I mentioned. The fund is administered through the Christensen Foundation, but I hung up. The Christensen Foundation. Stellan's family charity. The one they used to launder their reputation and occasionally their money. The one I'd helped organize galas for when I was his wife, back when I thought I understood what I'd married into. My hands were shaking as I called him. He answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been waiting. Luna. You can't do this. I was walking again, fast, needing movement to contain the fury rising in my chest. You can't just buy your way back into my life. I haven't bought anything. The foundation made an independent decision based on merit. His voice was smooth, reasonable, the tone he used when he was lying through his teeth. If you happen to be selected, that's simply fortunate timing. Bullshit. You set this up. Prove it. I wanted to scream. This was exactly the kind of move Stellan excelled at. Technically legal, superficially generous, and absolutely calculated to put me in his debt. I'm not accepting it. Then you're refusing a legitimate scholarship on the basis of paranoia. The university will think you're unstable. He was right, and he knew it. If I turned down a full-ride scholarship without a valid reason, it would raise questions I couldn't answer without revealing my connection to Stellan, which would open doors I'd worked hard to close. Why? I stopped in the middle of the quad, students giving me annoyed looks as they detoured around me. Why are you doing this? Because you deserve to finish your degree without working yourself into exhaustion. Because you're brilliant, and your financial situation shouldn't determine your future. A pause. And because I can. The honesty of that last statement was almost worse than the manipulation. Stellan doing something simply because he could, because he had the power and resources and wanted to demonstrate it. I don't want anything from you. Too late. The scholarship exists. Take it or don't. But it won't go away just because you're angry with me. I hung up again, trembling with a rage that had nowhere to go. The second sign came a week later. I was at Casper's apartment, a modest one-bedroom he shared with a roommate near campus. We were on his bed, kissing with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested we'd progress to more shortly, when his phone rang. He ignored it at first, but it rang again. Then again. Sorry, he muttered, pulling back to check the screen. His expression changed, confusion, then concern. I need to take this. I sat up, pulling my shirt back down. Everything okay? He answered the call, and I watched his face cycle through emotions I couldn't quite name. Yes, this is Casper Madsen. No, I wasn't aware. When did this... A long pause, his eyes widening. That can't be right. I paid off my student loans last year through my parents' savings. My stomach dropped. What do you mean there's a lien against my father's business? We don't... He went pale. 200,000 euros. That's impossible. We never took out that loan. I knew. Even before he finished the call, hands shaking as he stared at his phone, I knew exactly what had happened. Casper, I started, but he cut me off. My dad's hardware store. Someone filed paperwork claiming he took out a loan 5 years ago and defaulted. They're threatening to seize the property. He was scrolling frantically through his phone, texts from his father coming through in rapid succession. This is insane. We have records. We can prove it's not real. My voice came out flat, dead. The loan isn't real. He looked up, confusion warring with panic. What? It's a legal fiction. Someone created false paperwork to create the appearance of debt. Your father will be able to fight it, but it'll take months and thousands in legal fees to unravel. How do you know that? Because I'd been married to a man who specialized in exactly these kinds of pressure tactics. Because I'd watched Stellan's lawyers weaponize the legal system against his enemies dozens of times. Because I knew his signature moves like I knew my own heartbeat. I just do. I stood, started gathering my things. I need to go. Luna, wait. I'm sorry, Casper. I'm so sorry. I kissed his forehead, tasting his confusion and fear. Get a lawyer. Document everything. Don't pay anything or sign anything until you've had it independently verified. I left before he could ask the questions I couldn't answer. I called Stellan from the street outside Casper's building. He answered on the first ring again. Stop. The word came out as a command, not a plea. Whatever you're doing, stop it right now. I'm having dinner. Would you like to join me? His voice carried that smooth amusement that made me want to reach through the phone and strangle him. You went after Casper's family. I have no idea what you're talking about. Stellan, have dinner with me, Luna. Tonight. Come alone. Talk to me for 1 hour, and I'll ensure whatever issues your boyfriend's family is experiencing resolve themselves. The threat was barely veiled. Cooperate, or watch Casper's father's business crumble under the weight of legal fiction. This is extortion. This is an invitation to dinner. You're blackmailing me into dating you. I'm creating an opportunity for conversation. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its smoothness. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Luna. I'm trying to get your attention. You have it. My hand was clenched so tight around the phone that my knuckles had gone white. Congratulations. You've successfully demonstrated that you can destroy innocent people's lives to force me into a room with you. What a compelling argument for why we should be together. Silence. Then, Il Padrino. 8 o'clock tonight. Come alone. He hung up before I could respond. Il Padrino was the kind of restaurant that didn't list prices on the menu, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford to be there. I'd been once before, years ago, when Stellan and I were married, and he'd wanted to impress some business associates. I remembered feeling impossibly out of place among the crystal and white tablecloths, like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. I showed up at 8 wearing jeans and my university sweatshirt, partly because I refused to dress up for what was essentially a hostage negotiation, partly because it was all I had time to throw on after my shift at the cafe. The maitre d' took one look at me and clearly wanted to refuse entry, but then recognition flashed in his eyes. Or more likely, Stellan had warned him I'd be underdressed. He led me through the restaurant to a private room in the back, the kind reserved for people who didn't want witnesses to their conversations. Stellan stood when I entered, and I had to actively remind myself that good manners didn't erase bad behavior. He'd changed from whatever he'd been wearing earlier into a navy suit, hair perfectly styled, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread on Scandinavian CEOs who definitely don't run criminal empires. You came. He sounded genuinely surprised. You threatened an innocent family to force me here. Of course I came. I took the seat across from him without waiting for him to pull out my chair. Let's get this over with. You have 1 hour. Talk. He sat slowly, studying me with that intensity I'd never quite gotten used to. You're angry. Revolutionary observation. You should have been a detective. A ghost of a smile. Still sharp with the sarcasm. I missed that. I didn't miss you cataloging the things you liked about me like I'm a car you're considering buying. I flagged down the server who'd appeared in the doorway. Water, please. Just water. Bring the lady whatever she wants to eat, Stellan countermanded. She's paying, apparently. so order freely. I'm not... I stopped, took a breath. This was exactly the kind of baiting I needed to avoid. Fine, the salmon and a glass of white wine, whatever's cheapest. The server fled, probably sensing the tension. So, Stellan folded his hands on the table, businessman pose. You wanted to talk. You wanted to talk. I wanted to never see you again, but you made that impossible. Why? The question was direct, and for the first time, I heard genuine confusion beneath it. Why did you leave, Luna? The real reason. Not the generic "we weren't right for each other" excuse you gave your lawyer. I stared at him, searching for signs of manipulation, but his expression seemed honest, genuinely bewildered, which was almost worse than the alternative. You really don't know. It wasn't a question. No. Stellan, you tracked my every movement, you vetted my friends. You made decisions about my life without consulting me, because you assumed you knew better. I kept my voice level, factual. You treated me like an asset to be managed, not a partner to be respected. I was protecting you. He said it like it was obvious, like it explained everything. My world is dangerous. I needed to make sure. You needed to control me. I cut him off. There's a difference between protection and possession. I was your wife, not your property, and you never learned to tell the difference. His jaw tightened. I gave you everything, except autonomy, except trust, except the basic respect of letting me make my own choices, even wrong ones. The server returned with my water, and I took a long drink to buy time, organizing my thoughts. Do you know what the breaking point was? The moment I knew I had to leave? He shook his head. You remember when I wanted to take that job at the nonprofit? The one working with at-risk youth? The position that would have put you in contact with people connected to my rivals. Yes. You didn't discuss it with me. You didn't explain your concerns or ask me to reconsider. You just made it go away, called in a favor, had the position filled before I could even interview. Then you told me you'd done it, like I should be grateful. His expression had gone carefully neutral. It was dangerous. It was my decision to make. My voice rose slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. That's when I understood. You didn't see me as capable of assessing risk or making adult choices. You saw me as something fragile that needed to be kept safe, even from myself. You were 22, Luna. You didn't understand. Exactly. I set down my water glass hard enough that it clicked against the table. I was 22. I married you at 22, Stellan. I was too young to understand what I was agreeing to. And instead of helping me grow into an equal partner, you kept me in a gilded cage and called it love. Silence stretched between us. Stellan's hands had curled into fists on the table, and I could see him working through something, expression shifting in ways I couldn't quite read. I thought. He stopped, started again. I thought I was being a good husband, providing for you, keeping you safe. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? That's what you're supposed to do for a child, not a wife. I gentled my voice slightly, because despite everything, I could see he genuinely believed what he was saying. I needed a partner, Stellan. Someone who trusted me to be an adult, even if I made mistakes. You couldn't do that. Could you have loved someone who let you walk into danger? The question was quiet, almost vulnerable, and it hit harder than I expected. Because the honest answer was, I didn't know. Maybe I'd been as complicit in our dynamic as he was, accepting his protection because it was easier than fighting for my independence. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know that what we had wasn't sustainable. I was disappearing, Stellan, becoming this smaller, softer version of myself, because that's what you needed me to be. And if I'd stayed, eventually there wouldn't have been anything left of me. Our food arrived, breaking the moment. We sat in silence as the server plated everything with unnecessary ceremony, then disappeared again. "Fix Casper's father's problem," I said once we were alone. "Right now. Call whoever you need to call and make it go away." He pulled out his phone without argument, made a brief call in Danish that I couldn't follow, then set it aside. "Done. The paperwork will be revealed as fraudulent by morning." "Thank you." "Is he good to you?" Stellan picked up his fork, but didn't actually eat anything. "Your boyfriend?" "That's not your concern." "Humor me." I considered refusing, then decided honesty might actually be the fastest way out of this conversation. "He's nice, safe, exactly what I needed after you. After us." "But?" "There's no but. Casper is good to me." "You're lying. You forget. I can read your tells." Stellan leaned forward slightly. "You touch your collarbone when you're uncomfortable. You've done it 3 times since mentioning him." I pulled my hand away from my throat, irritated that he was right. "Fine, he's fine. Not exciting, but that's the point. I don't want excitement. I don't want intensity. I want normal. You'll be bored within 6 months. Better bored than controlled." Is that really the choice? Boredom or control? His ice blue eyes held mine, and for a moment I saw something raw there, something that looked almost like pain. What if there's a third option? There isn't. Not with you. I forced myself to eat, mechanically chewing salmon I couldn't taste. You can't change, Stellan. Men like you, with your power and your need for control, you don't just wake up one day and become different people. What if I could? What if I learned? He set down his fork, abandoned all pretense of eating. You said I kept you in a cage. What if I tore down the bars? What if I proved I could be what you need? My heart did something complicated in my chest, and I hated it. Why would you do that? Because losing you was the worst mistake I ever made. His voice had gone quiet, intense in a way that had nothing to do with threat and everything to do with honesty. Because I've spent 2 years pretending I was fine with the divorce, fine with you moving on. And then I walked into that cafe and saw you. Really saw you. Not the version of you I'd built in my head. And I realized I never actually knew you at all. I couldn't breathe properly. Stellan, no, let me finish. He raised a hand, not touching me, just asking for space. You were right. About all of it. I did treat you like something to be managed. I did make decisions for you instead of with you. And I convinced myself it was love because I genuinely believed keeping you safe was the most important thing I could do. He paused. I was wrong. You can't just apologize your way out of this. I know. Words are cheap, especially mine. That's why I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking for the chance to prove I can do better. By stalking me? By threatening my boyfriend's family? That's your idea of doing better? He had the grace to look ashamed. I panicked, seeing you with him, realizing you'd actually moved on. I reverted to old patterns. It was wrong. I'm sorry. I pushed my plate away, appetite completely gone. I don't know what you want from me, Stellan. Time. Just time. Let me show you I can be different. No surveillance, no interference. Just let me exist in your orbit again. Let me earn back the right to be in your life, even if just as a friend. Why would I do that? Because part of you still cares. He said it with certainty, and I wanted to argue, but couldn't. I see it in the way you react when I'm around. You're angry, yes. You have every right to be. But underneath the anger is something else. Something that recognizes what we had, even if it was broken. What we had hurt me. I know. And I will spend however long it takes making amends for that if you let me. I sat back, studying him across the table. This vulnerable version of Stellan was unfamiliar, disarming. Part of me wanted to believe him, but I'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. I need to think, I said finally, about all of this. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. He signaled for the check, despite my earlier claim that I'd pay. But Luna, one more thing. What? If he hurts you, your boyfriend, call me. Please. Not because I have a right to be involved in your life, but because I care about your well-being, and I always will, even if you never speak to me again after tonight. The sincerity in his voice undid something in my chest. I stood, needing to leave before I did something stupid like cry or, worse, forgive him. Goodbye, Stellan. Good night, Luna. He stood as well, the manners so ingrained they were automatic. For what it's worth, I really am proud of who you're becoming, even if I don't get to be part of it. I left before he could see my eyes water, before the dam I'd built 2 years ago could crack any further. Outside, the October air bit through my sweatshirt, grounding me. I pulled out my phone to call a rideshare, but my hands were shaking too badly to manage the app. A car pulled up, one of Stellan's, sleek and black, with tinted windows. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a woman I didn't recognize. Mr. Christensen arranged for your ride home, Miss Nielsen. Free of charge, no expectations. He said to tell you he understands if you prefer to find your own way. But the offer stands. I should have refused. Should have called my own car, maintained my independence. But I was exhausted and emotional and didn't want to spend money I didn't have on principle. Fine. I got in the back seat, gave my address. The driver didn't try to make conversation, which I appreciated. I watched Copenhagen roll past the windows. My city now, not his, even if his fingerprints were all over it, and tried to process what had just happened. Stellan claiming he'd changed. Stellan apologizing. Stellan letting me leave without fighting it. Part of me recognized the tactics. The scholarship. The threat to Casper. The dramatic dinner invitation. Classic Stellan. Manufacturing situations to get what he wanted. But another part, the part I tried to ignore, remembered the genuine confusion on his face when I'd explained why I left. The shame when I'd called out his tactics. The vulnerability when he'd admitted he'd been wrong. Which version was real? The manipulator or the man trying to make amends? My phone buzzed. Casper. My dad's lawyer just called. The lien was fraudulent. Paperwork is being retracted. It's like it never happened. What the hell? I stared at the message, then typed, "That's great news. I'm glad it worked out." What else could I say? That my ex-husband had manufactured the crisis and then solved it to prove a point. That I'd just had dinner with someone who could destroy Casper's entire family on a whim? The car pulled up to my apartment building, modest, affordable mine. Everything Stellan's penthouse hadn't been. "Thank you," I told the driver. "Mr. Christensen asked me to give you this." She handed me a business card, simple and elegant. Stellan's private number, the one I deleted from my phone 2 years ago. "In case you need anything," the driver added. "No strings, just help if you want it." I took the card, knowing I should throw it away immediately. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket and headed inside, where my roommate was watching TV, and the dishes in the sink reminded me that this was real life, not the fantasy world Stellan tried to create. But as I got ready for bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about his face when he'd said losing me was his worst mistake. And I hated that part of me wondered if he'd meant it. The weeks after that dinner blurred together in a haze of midterms, work shifts, and a growing sense of unease I couldn't quite name. True to his word, Stellan didn't contact me. No calls, no texts, no sudden appearances at the cafe. It should have been a relief. Instead, his absence felt somehow louder than his presence had been. Casper and I continued dating, but something had shifted. Maybe it was the secret I was keeping, the dinner with Stellan, the true reason behind his father's legal crisis. Maybe it was something deeper, a fundamental incompatibility I'd been ignoring because safe felt more important than right. "You're distracted," Casper said one evening in late November. We were at his place, supposedly studying for finals, but I'd been staring at the same page of my international business textbook for 20 minutes. "Sorry, just stressed about exams." The lie came easily, and I hated myself for it. He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention in that earnest way of his. "Luna, is everything okay? With us, I mean?" My stomach dropped. "Of course. Why would you ask that?" "Because you've been different since that weird thing with my dad's business. More withdrawn, like you're here physically, but somewhere else mentally." He reached for my hand, and I let him take it, even though it felt wrong. "Did something happen? Can I help?" The concern in his voice made guilt curdle in my chest. Casper was genuinely kind. He didn't deserve this, whatever this was. The half-truths, and the emotional distance, and the ex-husband I couldn't quite let go of. "I'm just overwhelmed," I said, which was at least partially true. "School and work and everything. It's not you." "Okay." But he didn't sound convinced. "You know you can talk to me, right? About anything?" Could I, though? Could I tell him that my ex-husband ran a criminal empire and had been manipulating both our lives from the shadows? That I'd had dinner with said ex-husband and hadn't mentioned it? That part of me, a traitorous, stupid part, had spent the last month replaying Stellan's words on an endless loop? "I know," I lied again. "Thank you." We had sex that night, and it was fine. Pleasant. Perfectly adequate. But as Casper fell asleep beside me afterward, I stared at the ceiling and acknowledged what I'd been avoiding. I wasn't being fair to him. He deserved someone who was all in, not someone comparing him to a man who'd hurt her, but also understood her in ways that felt dangerously like destiny. The truth about Casper revealed itself 2 weeks later, the week before Christmas break. I'd finished my last exam early and decided to surprise him at his apartment with coffee and those cinnamon rolls he liked from the bakery near campus. We'd been together 4 months now, long enough that showing up unannounced should have felt comfortable, not invasive. I used the spare key he'd given me last month, balancing the coffee carrier and bakery bag while trying to turn the lock. Inside, I could hear voices, Casper's and someone else's. Female. Maybe his roommate had a girlfriend over. I pushed open the door, calling out, "Hey, I brought breakfast." The words died in my throat. Casper was on the couch. With a woman. Specifically, underneath a woman. Both of them in various states of undress that made their activity perfectly clear. Time did that thing where it slows down and speeds up simultaneously. I saw everything in hyper-real detail. The woman's blonde hair spilling across Casper's chest, his hands on her waist, the shocked expression blooming across both their faces as they realized I was standing there. The coffee carrier slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the floor with a catastrophic splash of hot liquid and shattering ceramic. "Luna?" Casper scrambled up, pulling on his pants with frantic movements. Shit, this isn't what?" My voice came out remarkably steady considering the floor had just dropped out from under me. "Isn't you fucking someone who isn't your girlfriend?" The blonde woman had the grace to look embarrassed as she gathered her clothes. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know he had... Get out." I didn't raise my voice, but something in my tone made her move faster, fleeing toward the bathroom to dress. Casper had his pants on now, was reaching for his shirt. "Luna, please. Let me explain." "How long?" I asked, still standing in the doorway, coffee pooling around my shoes. We're not. He ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture he used when struggling with a difficult problem set. It just happened. A few times. I didn't mean for it to. How long? Each word precise, controlled. A month. Maybe 6 weeks. He looked genuinely miserable, which only made it worse. But it wasn't serious. It was just, "You've been so distant lately." And she was there. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. A month. Maybe 6 weeks. Which meant this had started right around the time Stellan had come back into my life. When I'd been distracted and withdrawn and emotionally unavailable because I was too busy wrestling with my past to be present in my current relationship. The worst part? I wasn't even that hurt. Embarrassed, yes. Angry at the deception, absolutely. But not devastated. Not heartbroken. Which probably said everything about the relationship that needed to be said. "We're done," I said simply. "Luna, please. Can we talk about this?" He took a step toward me, and I held up a hand to stop him. "There's nothing to talk about. You cheated. I'm leaving. That's the entire conversation." I turned toward the door, then paused, looking back. "For what it's worth, Casper, you were right. I was distant. I wasn't fully present in this relationship, and that's on me. But cheating was still a choice you made. Own it." I left before he could respond, before the blonde woman could emerge from the bathroom, before I had to process any of it beyond the immediate facts. In the elevator, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What?" "Luna?" Stellan's voice concerned. "Are you all right?" Of course he knew something was wrong. He probably had surveillance on Casper's building, had watched me arrive and leave in under 5 minutes, had calculated exactly what that meant. "How did you—" "Never mind. I don't want to know." I stepped out into the cold December morning, my coat suddenly inadequate against the wind. "What do you want?" "I'm sending a car. Where are you?" "I don't need your car." "Luna, you sound upset. Please, just let me—" "Your instincts were right." The words came out bitter. About Casper. He was exactly as boring and safe and predictable as you said. Right up until I found him fucking someone else in his living room. Silence. Then, "I'm coming to get you myself. Don't move." "Stellan." But he'd already hung up. I should have walked away. Should have called Sina or taken a rideshare back to my apartment and dealt with this like an adult. Instead, I stood on that street corner, numb and confused, and tired of pretending I had everything under control. Stellan's car pulled up 8 minutes later. Not his usual sedan with a driver, but a low-slung sports car. Aston Martin, probably. Something ridiculous and expensive that he drove himself. He got out, leaving the engine running, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked disheveled. Hair slightly mussed, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit, like he'd dressed in a hurry. "Get in." Not a command, just a statement. I got in. He pulled away from the curb with smooth precision, heading north toward the waterfront. Neither of us spoke for several minutes, the car's engine purring between us like a sleek animal. "Did you know?" I asked finally. "About his infidelity?" "No, I would have told you." He glanced at me briefly before returning his attention to the road. "I had someone keeping an eye on him for security purposes, but we weren't monitoring his personal activities. That would have been—" He paused. "Invasive. But you're having him followed. I'm having everyone in your orbit monitored for potential threats. There's a difference." At my look, he added, "I know. I said I wouldn't interfere. But I can't turn off the part of me that needs to know you're safe." "That's the problem, Stellan. You see protecting me and controlling me as the same thing." I'm working on understanding the difference. He pulled into a parking lot near the harbor, killed the engine. Come on. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without you being in shock on a street corner. He got out, and after a moment's hesitation, I followed. The somewhere turned out to be a high-rise apartment building with views of the water, all steel and glass and money. Of course. Stellan's solution to emotional crisis was always more luxury, as if expensive environments could cushion any pain. But when we entered the penthouse, I realized something was different about this place. It wasn't lived in. No personal touches, no signs of habitation beyond the furniture. This was a staging area, not a home. I bought this last month, Stellan said, watching my reaction. After our dinner, I thought. He trailed off, seeming suddenly uncertain. I thought maybe if I had a place that wasn't my penthouse, somewhere without all the history, we could talk more easily. Neutral ground. He'd bought an entire apartment as neutral territory. The absurdity of it should have been funny, but I was too emotionally drained to process it properly. I'll make coffee. He headed toward the kitchen, gleaming appliances that had probably never been used, leaving me to wander to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Copenhagen spread out below, gray and beautiful in the winter morning. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and tried to sort through the jumble of emotions competing for space in my chest. Embarrassment at walking in on Casper, anger at his deception, guilt at my own emotional unavailability, and underneath it all, a complicated relief that I now had an excuse to end a relationship that had never quite fit. Here. Stellan appeared beside me with 2 mugs of coffee, made exactly how I liked it, which meant he'd remembered, even after 2 years. I took the mug, warming my hands on it. I wasn't in love with him, I said quietly. Casper. I liked him. He was nice, but I wasn't in love. I know. You don't get to sound smug about that. Not smug, relieved. At my sharp look, he added, not because he was unworthy of you, though he clearly was if he couldn't recognize what he had, but because watching you with someone else these past months has been. He searched for the right word. Educational. Educational how? It taught me what I took for granted, what I lost. He set down his coffee, turned to face me fully. When we were married, I thought I was giving you everything. Security, comfort, protection. I didn't realize I was taking away the things that actually mattered. Your autonomy, your voice, your right to make mistakes and grow from them. And now you realize that? Now I'm beginning to. He reached up like he was going to touch my face, then stopped himself, hand falling back to his side. Luna, I know this isn't the right time. You just found out your boyfriend was cheating. You're hurt and confused, and probably want nothing to do with me, but I need to say this before I lose my nerve. My heart was beating too fast. Say what? I love you. I loved you when we were married, even though I expressed it terribly. I loved you through the divorce. And I love you now, watching you build this incredible life without me. His ice blue eyes held mine, raw and honest. Not the version of you I tried to mold. You, the sharp-tongued, stubborn, brilliant woman who called me out on my bullshit and left when I wouldn't listen. I couldn't breathe properly. Stellan, I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know. He stepped back, creating distance. Stay here today. Take the space. Process what happened with Casper. When you're ready, I'll drive you home. No conditions, no expectations. Why are you being so understanding? The question came out suspicious, because this version of Stellan, patient, respectful of boundaries, was completely foreign to me. Because I spent 2 years learning to respect your choices, even when I hated them. Starting with your choice to leave me. He picked up his coffee, moved toward the door. "I'll be in the other room if you need anything. Take your time." He left me standing there, staring at the place he'd been, my mind spinning with too many thoughts to organize. Stellan Christensen, who'd once tracked my every movement, was giving me space. Stellan Christensen, who'd never apologized for anything, had just admitted he was wrong. Stellan Christensen, who I'd spent 2 years trying to forget, had just told me he loved me. And the worst part? The absolutely terrible, complicated worst part? I believed him. I spent 3 hours in that apartment, staring out at the water, drinking coffee, and trying to understand my own feelings. Casper's betrayal barely registered beyond the initial shock. What consumed me was the larger question. Had I been emotionally unavailable because I was healing from Stellan, or because I'd never actually moved on? Sometime around noon, my stomach reminded me I'd skipped breakfast. The coffee and cinnamon rolls had ended up on Casper's floor. I found Stellan in what he'd designated as the office, working on his laptop, looking unfairly attractive in the winter sunlight streaming through the windows. "Hungry?" he asked without looking up, as if he'd been monitoring my presence even while giving me space. "Starving." He closed the laptop immediately. "There's a restaurant downstairs, or I can order delivery, whatever you prefer." "Downstairs is fine." I paused. "Thank you. For this. For not. Pushing." "I'm learning." He stood, grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. "Slowly, but I'm learning." The restaurant was the kind of upscale casual that only existed in buildings like this. Exposed brick and Edison bulbs, menu prices that made me wince internally. Stellan read my expression and smiled slightly. "My treat. Before you argue, consider it payment for tolerating my presence during a difficult day." We ordered, pasta for me, steak for him, and fell into a strange, tentative conversation. Not about us, not about Casper, just talking. He asked about my classes, my final exams, my thesis topic for next semester. I found myself answering honestly, even enthusiastically, because my international business focus was genuinely interesting to me. "You're going to be brilliant at this," he said after I'd explained my thesis comparing Scandinavian and American corporate cultures. "You have the analytical mind for it, but also the people skills. That's rare. Is this where you offer me a job at your legitimate business holdings? Would you take it if I did?" He was smiling, but the question was serious. "No, I need to build my own reputation, not trade on yours." I paused. "But I appreciate that you think I could." "Luna, you could do anything you set your mind to. That was never in question." He set down his fork, expression growing serious. "The question was always whether I'd let you, and I didn't. I'm sorry for that." We finished eating in comfortable silence, and I found myself studying him. Really looking, not just reacting. He'd changed in subtle ways. The lines around his eyes slightly deeper, posture a fraction less rigid. Like he'd been carrying weight these past 2 years, and had only recently started to set it down. "What happened to you?" I asked as we left the restaurant. "After I left, what made you start questioning things?" He was quiet until we were back in his car, pulling out of the parking garage. "Therapy, actually. Court-ordered, as part of some legal settlement. I fought it at first, thought it was beneath me, unnecessary. But my lawyer convinced me it would look good, show good faith." "You went to therapy to manipulate a judge?" "I started therapy to manipulate a judge," he corrected. "I stayed because the therapist was smarter than me. She saw through my bullshit immediately and refused to play along. Despite everything, I smiled. I like her already. Dr. Johansson, 62, no patience for charm or evasion, immune to intimidation. She's terrifying." He glanced at me. "She made me deconstruct every relationship in my life, showed me patterns I'd been repeating since childhood, made me understand that control was my way of dealing with fear. Fear of what? Losing things, people, control itself. He turned onto my street, somehow knowing where I lived without me giving directions. My father built his empire through force and fear. I learned that was how you kept what mattered. Dr. Johansson taught me that's actually how you guarantee you'll lose it. We pulled up outside my building, and he killed the engine, but didn't get out. Neither did I. We sat there in his expensive car, the afternoon light fading into early winter evening. So what now? I asked quietly. Now I drive away. You go inside, process today, figure out what you need. He turned to look at me fully. And if you decide you want to talk more, about us, about possibilities, about anything, you have my number. Use it or don't. That's your choice, Luna, not mine. I should have just gotten out, should have thanked him for the ride and closed this chapter permanently. Instead, I found myself asking, do you really think you can change? Be someone different? I don't want to be someone different. I want to be a better version of myself. He smiled slightly. One who understands that loving someone means trusting them to make their own choices, even when those choices don't include me. That's very evolved of you. Don't give me too much credit. I still want to know who you're with, where you are, whether you're safe. The difference is now I understand that acting on those wants without your consent is wrong. He reached across the console, stopping just short of touching my hand. I'm trying, Luna. That's all I can promise. That I'll keep trying. I looked at his hand, almost touching mine, and felt the pull of something I'd been denying for months. I need time. Take all you need. And space. Real space. Not you buying apartments and tracking my movements. Agreed. He withdrew his hand. Though for the record, I'm keeping the apartment. I like the view. I laughed despite myself, and the sound surprised us both. When was the last time I genuinely laughed with him? Not the sharp, defensive humor I'd wielded earlier, but real amusement. Good night, Stellan. Good night, Luna. He waited until I was out of the car and at my building's door before pulling away, a consideration I noticed and appreciated. Upstairs, my roommate took one look at my face and immediately poured wine. Bad day? Weird day. I accepted the glass, collapsed onto our second-hand couch. Caught Casper cheating, spent the afternoon with my ex-husband, realized my life is a complicated mess. In that order? Unfortunately, yes. She whistled low. Okay, starting from the top. Casper is trash. We hated him anyway. He wore those terrible boat shoes. Despite everything, I smiled. We never discussed his shoes. We didn't need to. They spoke for themselves. She settled beside me, tucking her feet up. Now, the ex-husband, the dangerous one you never talk about, that's the one. And I think he might have actually changed, or at least be trying to change, which is somehow more terrifying than when he was just consistently terrible. She absorbed this, sipping her wine. Do you still love him? It was the question I'd been avoiding all day. The one I didn't want to answer because acknowledging it made everything more complicated. I don't know, I said finally. Maybe. Or maybe I just love the version of him that exists in my memory, before I understood what I'd married into. Those aren't mutually exclusive. She squeezed my hand. It's okay to have complicated feelings about someone who hurt you, but also loved you in his own fucked up way. When did you become so wise? Therapy, and too much reality TV about toxic relationships. She refilled both our glasses. Whatever you decide about Mr. Dangerous ex-husband, just promise me you won't let anyone, including him, make you smaller again. You've worked too hard becoming yourself. I promised, and meant it. That night, lying in bed, I pulled out Stellan's business card, the one I'd kept, the one I'd told myself I was going to throw away eventually. His private number, written in his own hand on the back. In case you need anything. I added it to my contacts. Not because I was ready to call, but because for the first time in 2 years, I was willing to consider the possibility that maybe, eventually, I might want to. January arrived with the kind of bitter cold that made Copenhagen feel like it existed at the edge of the world. I threw myself into spring semester with the intensity of someone trying to outrun her own thoughts. 5 classes, 20 hours a week at the cafe, thesis research that kept me at the library until closing. I didn't call Stellan, but I didn't delete his number either. Casper tried to reach out twice, apologetic texts that I deleted without reading, a voicemail I never listened to. Sina, who'd extracted the full story over several wine-fueled evenings, approved of my radio silence. He made his choice. You don't owe him closure or forgiveness or whatever he thinks he needs to feel better about himself. What I didn't tell Sina, or anyone, was that I'd started noticing things. Small things that might have been coincidence but probably weren't. The scholarship fund that had mysteriously appeared last semester. It expanded, now covering not just tuition, but also textbooks and a larger monthly stipend. When I'd called the financial aid office to question it, they'd insisted it was merit-based, completely legitimate, tied to my academic performance. The cafe where I worked got a new espresso machine, top of the line, worth more than my car would be if I owned one. The owner claimed it was a gift from a satisfied customer who wanted to remain anonymous. My apartment building suddenly had functioning heat for the first time in 3 years. Building-wide upgrade, the landlord said, funded by new ownership that was investing in property improvements. Each incident alone could be explained away. Together, they formed a pattern I recognized. Stellan, keeping his promise to give me space while simultaneously ensuring I was comfortable. Not controlling, exactly. More like providing a safety net I hadn't asked for but couldn't quite bring myself to refuse. It should have angered me. Instead, I found it almost endearing in its transparency. He was trying so hard to help without interfering that it was almost clumsy, like watching someone who'd never learned subtlety attempt to be subtle. "You're smiling at your phone again," Sina observed one afternoon during our shift. "New guy?" "No, just..." I hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than evasion, my ex, being annoyingly thoughtful from a distance. The dangerous one? I'd told her some of it, enough that she understood why the relationship had ended, not enough that she knew exactly what Stellan's business entailed. "Yeah. And you're considering giving him another chance?" Not a question. "I don't know. Maybe?" "He says he's changed." "They always say that." She handed a customer their latte, then turned back to me. "But has he actually demonstrated it? With actions, not just words?" I thought about the scholarship that gave me freedom to focus on school. The apartment warmth that meant I wasn't wearing 3 layers to bed. The cafe equipment that made our jobs easier. The complete absence of surveillance or interference, or any of the controlling behaviors that had defined our marriage. "Yeah," I admitted. "Actually, he has. Then maybe he deserves a conversation." She nudged my shoulder. "But make him work for it. Don't make it easy." I waited until Valentine's Day. Partly to be cruel, partly because I wanted to see if he'd break his promise and reach out first. He didn't. No texts, no calls, no dramatic flower deliveries at the cafe. The silence was somehow louder than any grand gesture could have been. It demonstrated restraint, patience, qualities Stellan had never possessed when I'd known him before. At 8 p.m. after my shift ended, I stood outside the cafe in the February darkness and pulled out my phone. Stared at his contact for a full minute before my thumb moved. "Are you free to talk?" The response came within seconds, which meant he'd been waiting, hoping. Always. For you. Always. The apartment. The one with the water view. Can we meet there? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I took the subway, declined the rideshare he probably wanted to send, and arrived at the building before him. The doorman, clearly briefed, let me up without question. The penthouse was exactly as I'd left it 2 months ago, clean and empty and waiting. Stellan arrived 15 minutes later, slightly breathless like he'd rushed. He wore jeans and a sweater again, that same casual look that made him seem more human, less untouchable. His hair was damp at the edges. He'd been working out, probably, or at the gym in whatever building he actually lived in now. "Hi," he said, and the single word carried so much hope and fear that it made my chest ache. "Hi." I was still wearing my cafe uniform, smelling like coffee and exhaustion. "I've been thinking." That sounds ominous. He stayed by the door, giving me space even in his own apartment. "About us, about what you said in December." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the building's excellent heating. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Stellan. That's the honest truth. You hurt me. You made me feel small and controlled and like my choices didn't matter. That's not something I can just forget because you apologized and bought some heating repairs. I know." He moved slightly closer, still maintaining distance. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for the chance to build something new, different from what we had before." What would that even look like? The question was genuine. You're still who you are. I'm still who I am. The fundamental incompatibility hasn't changed. Hasn't it? He gestured toward the windows, the view, the space between us. 2 months ago, you wouldn't have called me. 6 months ago, you wouldn't have had my number. A year ago, you would have run the moment you saw me in that cafe. He smiled slightly. We're already different, Luna. We're already building something new. We just haven't named it yet. I'm scared. The admission cost me, but it was true. I'm scared of falling back into old patterns, of letting you make decisions for me because it's easier than fighting, of waking up one day and realizing I've disappeared again. Then don't. He crossed the remaining distance between us, slowly, giving me time to back away if I wanted. Set boundaries. Tell me when I'm overstepping. Fight back when I get controlling. And I probably will sometimes, because that's muscle memory I'm still unlearning. But don't disappear, Luna. Stay present. Stay yourself. Make me earn you every single day. I looked up at him, at the raw honesty in his face, and felt something crack open in my chest. This is terrifying. I know. I don't have guarantees that this will work. Neither do I. And I won't move back into your world. I won't be the wife of a crime boss again. I'm building my own life, and that's non-negotiable. Good. I want you to have your own life. He reached up, finally, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear with infinite gentleness. I want to be part of it, not all of it. I want to support what you're building, not consume it. If you track my phone again, you'll leave, and you'll be right to. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb stroking across my cheekbone. I deleted all the surveillance software, Luna. I don't know where you are unless you tell me. It's been making me insane, but it's also been teaching me to trust. Good. I leaned into his touch despite my better judgment. Because trust goes both ways, and I need to know you respect my autonomy. I do. I will. Every day I'll prove it. He leaned down, stopping just before his lips touched mine. Can I kiss you? The fact that he asked, that he gave me the choice instead of just taking, undid something in me. Yes. He kissed me like he was afraid I'd shatter, like I was precious and fragile and might vanish if he held too tight. It was nothing like the passionate, consuming kisses from our marriage, where he'd claimed my mouth like he claimed everything else. This was different, uncertain, asking permission with every movement. I kissed him back, letting 2 years of anger and hurt and confused longing pour into the contact. My hands fisted in his sweater, pulling him closer, and he came willingly, but let me control the intensity, the depth, the duration. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "I missed you," he whispered. "Every day, every moment. I missed you so much it felt like I was walking around with half my heart missing. I missed you too." The admission should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like relief. I tried not to. I tried to move on and forget and build a life where you didn't exist. But I couldn't. What does this mean? He pulled back slightly to look at me. "For us. What do you want this to be? I don't know yet. Not a marriage, not right now. Maybe not ever." I held his gaze steadily. But maybe something new. Dating, but as adults who understand each other better. With boundaries and honesty and the understanding that I can walk away anytime I need to. I'll take it. He kissed me again, softer this time. "Whatever you're willing to give, I'll take it, and I'll keep proving I deserve more." We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking in a way we never had during our marriage. I told him about my thesis, my career goals, my fear that I'd never be truly independent because I'd always be defined by my connection to him. He told me about therapy, about deconstructing his relationship with his father, about the parts of the family business he was systematically divesting from because he wanted something cleaner for his future. "I can't walk away entirely," he admitted around midnight, both of us sitting on the floor with takeout containers scattered between us. "Some connections are permanent, but I can choose not to expand into new territories. I can focus on the legitimate holdings and let the other families handle the rest." "Is that safe?" I picked at my pad thai, appetite fading. "Won't that be seen as weakness?" "Probably. But I'm tired, Luna. Tired of constantly managing threats and alliances and violence. I want..." He trailed off, searching for words. "I want to be able to sleep at night without wondering who I'll have to destroy tomorrow to protect what's mine." "That sounds like progress. Dr. Johansson says it's growth." He smiled slightly. "I think it's just exhaustion. But either way, it's real." I believed him, and that belief felt both dangerous and essential. We didn't sleep together that night, though the temptation was there. Instead, Stellan called me a car, asking first if I wanted one, which I appreciated, and walked me down to wait for it. "Can I see you again?" he asked as the car pulled up. "Whenever you want. Your schedule, your terms. Next week, coffee, somewhere public." I needed to maintain some boundaries, some sense of control over the pace. Not Il Padrino or anywhere intimidating, just a normal cafe. "The one where you work?" "Sure, you already know where it is." I smiled slightly. "Come by after your therapy session. Dr. Johansson should have softened you up enough that you're bearable." He laughed, genuine and surprised. "I really did miss your sense of humor." "Good, because I'm not changing that for anyone, including you. I wouldn't want you to." In the car, watching Copenhagen slide past the windows, I texted Sina. "I'm giving him another chance. Controlled parameters, clear boundaries, but..." "Yeah." Her response came quickly. "Are you insane or brave?" "I can't tell. Both, probably. Well, if he fucks up, we know where he lives, and I have a very scary cousin who owes me a favor." I smiled at my phone, grateful for friends who supported me while also standing ready to destroy anyone who hurt me. The next 3 months were strange and wonderful, and occasionally terrifying. Stellan and I fell into a pattern: coffee once a week, dinner every other week, Long phone conversations where we talked about everything and nothing. He never pushed for more, never demanded I move faster, or give more than I was ready to give. He showed up to my thesis presentation, sitting in the back row with a pride on his face that made me stumble over my words. He celebrated when I got an A, sent flowers to the cafe with a note that just said brilliant. Always knew you would be. I met Dr. Johansson at his request, had coffee with the woman who'd been deconstructing his psyche for 2 years. She was exactly as he'd described, sharp, unimpressed by charm, absolutely immune to bullshit. He talks about you constantly, she told me over extremely good coffee in her office. The work we've done around control and fear has largely centered on unpacking his relationship with you. Is that normal in therapy? When someone's defining relationship is the one they destroyed? Yes. She studied me with clinical interest. He's made real progress, Luna. But I want you to understand, change is not linear. He'll have bad days. He'll revert to old patterns under stress. The question is whether he can recognize that and course correct. And can he? He's learning. Whether that's enough is something only you can determine. I appreciated her honesty, the lack of reassurance or false promises. It helped me understand what I was agreeing to. Not a finished product, but a work in progress. In April, Stellan invited me to his actual home for the first time since the divorce. Not the penthouse I'd fled from, but a new place. A townhouse in a quiet neighborhood, modern but warm, with a garden that surprised me. When did you become someone with a garden? I asked, touring the small space where early spring flowers were starting to bloom. When I realized I needed something living to take care of, that wasn't a criminal enterprise. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets. Dr. Johansson suggested it. Said I needed to learn nurturing instead of just protecting. How's that going? Half the plants died last month. But I'm learning. He pointed to a cluster of tulips. Those are new. I planted them thinking about you. Stubborn, beautiful, returning every spring no matter how harsh the winter was. The metaphor was heavy-handed, but I found myself touched anyway. That's almost poetic. Don't get used to it. I'm terrible at romantic gestures that aren't expensive and empty. This isn't empty. I turned to face him, taking in the care he'd put into this space, this life he was building separate from his empire. This is real, Stellan. Imperfect and uncertain, but real. He kissed me then, in his garden with dirt under our feet and spring sun on our faces, and it felt like a beginning instead of a repetition. By May, we'd fallen into something that felt almost like a relationship. Still careful, still maintaining separate lives and spaces, but connected in ways that mattered. I studied, worked, built my career plans. He managed his businesses, went to therapy, learned to garden with mixed success. And slowly, carefully, we learned each other all over again. I love you, he said one evening in late May. We were at his place, cooking dinner together, a domestic activity that would have been unthinkable during our marriage, when staff handled everything and I was kept safely separate from anything resembling normalcy. I paused in chopping vegetables. You've said that before. I know, but I wanted to say it again, now that you might actually believe me. He came up behind me, arms sliding around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. I love you, Luna. Not the idea of you. Not the version I tried to create. You, the woman who makes terrible jokes while studying international business, who falls asleep reading textbooks and drools slightly on the pages, who argues with me when I'm being controlling and refuses to let me win just because it's easier. I turned in his arms, looking up at him. I'm not ready to say it back yet. I know. It might take a long time, years even. I might never be ready. I'll wait. He kissed my forehead. However long it takes, I'll wait. And if the answer is never, I'll accept that too. Having you in my life at all is more than I deserve. You're getting better at the romantic gestures. Dr. Johansson has been coaching me. She says I use money as a shield against actual vulnerability. She's not wrong. I went back to chopping, comfortable in the circle of his arms. But you're learning. That's what matters. That night we made love for the first time since the divorce. It was different from how I remembered. Slower, more attentive, focused on my pleasure as much as his. He asked permission for everything, checked in constantly, made sure I felt safe and wanted and in control. Afterward, lying tangled together in his bed, I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite love, not yet, but trust. The beginning of belief that maybe, just maybe, we could build something that worked. "Stay," he murmured against my hair. "Just for tonight. No pressure for more. Just stay." I stayed. Summer arrived, bringing with it the end of my spring semester and a decision I'd been avoiding: what to do about my living situation. My lease was up in August, and my roommate had announced she was moving in with her girlfriend. I could find a new roommate, find a new apartment, or move in with me, Stellan said over breakfast one Sunday in early June. We were at a cafe near his place, not the one where I worked, somewhere neutral and public where we'd become regulars. I nearly choked on my coffee. That's a huge step. We were married. Living together is actually a step backward in some ways. He was trying for casual, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "You need a place. I have space. It makes logical sense." "Nothing about us makes logical sense." "True, but consider it anyway." He reached across the table, taking my hand. "Your own room if you want it. Your own space. No expectations beyond sharing the same address. And you'd save money, which could go toward your business plans after graduation." The practical argument was sound. I'd been trying to figure out how to afford both rent and the seed capital I'd need to eventually start my own consulting firm. Living with Stellan would solve the financial pressure entirely, but it would also mean giving up some of the independence I'd fought for. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Take your time. The offer stands whenever you're ready." I discussed it with Sina over drinks that night at a bar near campus. She'd become my sounding board for all things Stellan-related, offering honest opinions without judgment. "On one hand," she said, working through her second gin and tonic, "free rent and the chance to save money while you're still in school is huge. On the other hand, moving in with your ex-husband who you're tentatively dating again feels like asking for complications." Exactly my dilemma. What does your gut say? I considered it, trying to hear my intuition through all the logical arguments. That I want to, that it feels right, even though it's risky, that I trust him enough to try. Then maybe that's your answer. She flagged down the bartender for another round. You can always move out if it doesn't work. You're not locked in. I was locked in last time. The marriage, the life, the identity I took on as his wife. It all felt permanent until suddenly I couldn't breathe anymore. But you're not that person anymore. You're not 22 and naive. You know what you're walking into this time, and you have the tools to walk out if you need to. She squeezed my hand. Give yourself credit for how much you've grown. That night, lying in bed in my soon-to-be former apartment, I texted Stellan. "Okay, let's try it. But I have conditions." His response came quickly. "Name them." I spent 20 minutes composing the list. 1. My own space within the house that's completely mine. You don't enter without knocking. 2. My own key. I come and go as I please without explanation. 3. No tracking software on my phone or any other surveillance. 4. We split household responsibilities. I'm not your housekeeper. 5. If either of us wants space, We respect that without guilt or interrogation. 6. We tell people we're living together, but not engaged or moving toward marriage. This is a practical arrangement that also happens to be with someone I'm dating. 7. I can move out at any time, for any reason, without consequences or pressure to stay. His response took longer this time. Agreed to all. Can I add one condition of my own? What? That you promise to tell me if I'm slipping into old patterns. I can't fix what I don't know is broken. I smiled at my phone. Deal. Moving day was surreally domestic. Stellan hired movers, of course he did, but I insisted on packing my own things, maintaining some control over the process. The townhouse had a third-floor room he designated as mine, with its own bathroom and enough space for my books, desk, and the small life I'd built post-divorce. This is yours, he said, showing me around the empty space. Furniture, decoration, everything. Your choice. I'll fund it, but you decide what it looks like. I walked through the room, imagining it filled with my things, my personality. The window overlooked his garden, which had improved significantly since April. The tulips were gone, replaced by summer flowers I couldn't name. Okay, I said finally. I can work with this. He smiled, relief obvious. Good, because I've been terrified you'd change your mind. I still might. This is a trial run, remember? I remember. Over the next week, I slowly transformed the space into mine. A comfortable reading chair by the window, bookshelves for my textbooks and the novels I read for pleasure, a desk where I could work on my thesis, string lights that made the space feel cozy rather than sterile. Stellan stayed out of it entirely unless I explicitly asked for help, respecting the boundary I'd set. I'd catch him looking at the room sometimes, a softness in his expression that suggested he was happy I was making myself at home. We fell into rhythms, morning coffee together before our respective days, him to his offices, me to classes or the cafe, dinner several nights a week, either cooking together or ordering in, weekends that included both shared time and separate space. It was working, I realized one night in mid-July. Against all odds, we were actually making this work. The first real test came in late July, when I got offered an internship in Stockholm. I'd applied months ago before Stellan and I had reconnected, for a summer position at an international consulting firm. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I needed for my career. Prestigious, well-paid, great networking potential. The only problem, it started in 2 weeks and ran through the end of August. 6 weeks in another country, right after I'd moved in with Stellan. I told him over dinner at the townhouse, watching his face carefully for signs of the controlling behavior I was hyper-alert for. That's fantastic, he said, and seemed to mean it. You should absolutely accept. It's 6 weeks, in Sweden. I'm aware of where Stockholm is. He smiled slightly. Luna, this is exactly the kind of opportunity you've been working toward. Why would I want you to turn it down? Because I just moved in. Because we're still figuring this out. I set down my fork, suddenly nervous. Because 6 weeks apart right now feels like it could break this fragile thing we're building. He was quiet for a moment, considering. Here's what I think. I think you're testing me. Consciously or unconsciously, you're waiting for me to prove I'm still the man who would have prevented you from taking opportunities that took you away from him. The accuracy of that assessment made me flinch. Am I that transparent? Not transparent. Human. He reached across the table, taking my hand. Take the internship, Luna. Go to Stockholm, do brilliant work, build your career. I'll be here when you get back, and we'll pick up where we left off. Just like that? Just like that. With one request if you're willing. Here it was, the catch, the condition, the way he'd try to maintain control. What request? Video calls. Not every day if you don't want, but sometimes. So I can see your face and hear about your work and feel connected even while you're away. He squeezed my hand. That's it. No tracking, no checking in constantly, no guilt about living your life, just occasional calls so I don't forget the sound of your voice. The request was so reasonable, so respectful of my autonomy, that I felt something crack in my chest. That's it? That's your condition? That's it. He paused. Well, that and maybe you bring me back some of those Swedish chocolates. The ones in the blue box. I laughed, tension releasing. I can probably manage that. Then we have a deal. He raised his wine glass. To your Stockholm internship and the brilliant career you're building. I'm proud of you, Luna. So fucking proud. We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift between us. Trust deepening, belief solidifying, the understanding that he really had changed, that he was capable of supporting my independence instead of crushing it. Stockholm was everything I'd hoped. Challenging work, brilliant colleagues, a city that felt both foreign and familiar. I threw myself into the internship, determined to prove I deserved to be there. True to his word, Stellan didn't crowd me. We video called twice a week, conversations that ranged from updates about work to discussions about his therapy sessions, to comfortable silence while we both read, connected across the distance. How's the garden? I asked during one call in early August, propped up in my tiny Stockholm apartment. Thriving. I think the plants like me better when you're not here to compare my nurturing skills to yours. He smiled from his own screen, his office visible behind him. Though I miss having someone to share it with. Only 2 more weeks. I'm counting. His expression grew serious. Luna, there's something I want to talk about. My stomach dropped. That sounds ominous. Not ominous. Just important. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tell I'd learned to recognize. I've been thinking about my business interests, the less legitimate ones. Okay? I'm divesting completely. Not just pulling back, but actually selling off those holdings to other families, getting out entirely. I sat up straighter. Stellan, that's huge. Are you sure? Won't that create problems? Probably, but I'm tired of that life, Luna. Tired of the constant threat of violence, the moral compromise, the fear that someday the people I care about will be targeted because of me. He leaned closer to the camera. I want to build something clean, something I can be proud of, that won't require constant vigilance and ethical gymnastics. What will you do instead? Focus on the real estate holdings, the restaurants, the legitimate investments. It's not as exciting, but it's also not going to get anyone killed. He smiled slightly. Dr. Johansson says this is what real growth looks like. Choosing a different path even when it's harder. I'm proud of you. The words came out soft but genuine. That takes real courage. I'm terrified. The admission was vulnerable, raw. My father built that empire. Walking away from it feels like betraying him, even though I know intellectually that it's the right choice. Your father built his empire for his circumstances, his time. You're building yours for your life, your future. I paused. For our future, maybe. His eyes brightened. Our future? Maybe. If we keep doing this. If we keep growing together instead of destroying each other. I smiled. No promises, but maybe. Maybe is enough. He looked so hopeful, so genuinely happy, that I felt my heart expand. I'll take maybe. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. After we hung up, I sat in my Stockholm apartment and acknowledged what I'd been avoiding. I was falling in love with him again. Not the dangerous, consuming love from our marriage, but something steadier, more mature, built on respect and trust, rather than intensity and passion. It terrified me, but it also felt inevitable. I returned to Copenhagen in late August to find Stellan's townhouse transformed. Not dramatically. He hadn't redecorated or changed anything structural. But there were small touches that showed he'd been thinking about me. Fresh flowers in my room, my favorite coffee beans in the kitchen, a package on my desk, the books I'd mentioned wanting to read, purchased and waiting. "Welcome home," he said when I walked in, and the word home didn't feel wrong anymore. I missed this place. I set down my bags, looking around at the space that had become ours. "I missed you." "Yeah?" He crossed to me, pulling me into a hug that felt like safety. "Enough to stay. For now. We'll see how the semester goes. I'll take for now." He kissed the top of my head. "How was Stockholm?" I told him about the internship over dinner, the projects I'd worked on, the connections I'd made, the job offer I'd received to return after graduation for a full-time position. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he understood the significance of what I'd accomplished. "Are you going to take it?" he asked. "The Stockholm position?" "I don't know. It's an incredible opportunity, but it would mean leaving Copenhagen. Leaving." I trailed off, not quite ready to finish that sentence. "Leaving me," he completed gently. "It's okay to say it, Luna. If you take the Stockholm job, we'd have to figure out long distance or make difficult choices about our future. Would you move there, if I took it?" He considered this seriously. "I don't know. My businesses are here, my therapy is here, my life is here. But you're here too, and you matter more than any of those things." He took my hand. "Can we table this discussion until you actually have to decide? No point in borrowing worry from the future." "When did you become so wise?" "Therapy." He grinned. "Turns out paying someone $200 an hour to call you on your bullshit is surprisingly effective." That night, lying in my own bed in my own room in the house I shared with Stellan, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Contentment. Not perfect happiness. We still had issues to work through, decisions to make, trust to rebuild. But contentment. The sense that I was exactly where I needed to be. For the first time since moving in, I didn't lock my door. September brought my final year of university and the slow realization that I was going to have to make real decisions about my future, professionally and personally. The Stockholm offer sat in my inbox, deadline for response approaching. Stellan and I were solid, but undefined, living together, but not engaged, loving each other without saying the words. I was happy, I realized one morning while making coffee in our kitchen. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy in a way I hadn't been since before my marriage. The irony that this happiness involved the same man who'd made me miserable years ago wasn't lost on me. "You're thinking too loud," Stellan said, appearing in the doorway in his running clothes, hair damp with sweat. He'd started running in the mornings. Another Dr. Johansson suggestion about managing stress healthily. Just contemplating life's ironies. I handed him coffee. "How was the run?" "Brutal. I hate running." He took a grateful sip. "But it clears my head, so I keep doing it." "That's very mature of you." "I'm trying this new thing where I do things that are good for me even when I don't enjoy them." He leaned against the counter, watching me with that intensity that still made my pulse jump. "Speaking of which, we should probably talk about Stockholm." I thought we were tabling that discussion. That was 6 weeks ago. The table has limited space. He set down his coffee. "Luna, I don't want to be the reason you don't take an incredible opportunity, but I also don't want to lose you because I'm too proud to admit I need you in my life. So what are you suggesting? Come with me. I want to show you something." An hour later, after Stellan had showered and changed, we were in his car heading north out of the city. He wouldn't tell me where we were going, just that it was important and I should trust him. We drove for 90 minutes into the countryside, autumn colors starting to paint the landscape in rust and gold. Finally, he turned off the main road onto a long driveway that led to a property I didn't recognize. It was beautiful. A renovated farmhouse on several acres. Modern updates that maintained the historic character. Outbuildings that had been converted into what looked like offices or studios. Gardens sprawling in all directions. Mature trees providing shade and privacy. "What is this?" I asked as we got out of the car. "A possibility." He took my hand, leading me toward the main house. "I bought it 3 months ago. I was going to surprise you after you came back from Stockholm. But then the job offer happened and I realized surprises might not be what you need right now." "Stellan, whose house is this?" "Ours, potentially." He unlocked the door, revealing an interior that was clearly being renovated but showed enormous potential. "I've been working with architects to create something that works for both of us. Home offices so we can both work remotely when needed. Space for your consulting business when you're ready to start it. A garden you can actually cultivate properly, instead of just criticizing my attempts." I walked through the space, overwhelmed by the care that had gone into every choice. He'd remembered conversations we'd had about dream homes, preferences I'd mentioned casually months ago. This wasn't about controlling my environment. It was about creating a space we could both inhabit fully. "The Stockholm office has a Copenhagen branch," he said, following me through the rooms. "Not as prestigious, but still excellent. You could take a position there, build your career here, and we could make this work. Together. Long term." "You're asking me to choose you over my career?" "No. I'm asking you to consider that maybe you don't have to choose. That maybe there's a third option where you get both." He stopped in what would be the kitchen, afternoon light streaming through the windows. "But if the Stockholm position is truly what you want, if that's the best path for your career, I'll support that too. We'll figure out long distance. I'll visit every other weekend. We'll make it work because you matter more than geography." I leaned against the counter, trying to process what he was offering. "This is a huge commitment. This house, these plans, it's basically asking me to marry you without actually proposing." "Is that what you think?" He crossed to me, taking both my hands. "Luna, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. Maybe not ever if that's not what you want. I'm asking you to build a life with me that respects both our needs. You can work in Stockholm if that's best for your career. You can take the Copenhagen position if you want to stay. You can start your own firm from this house and work entirely independently. The point is, whatever you choose, I'm here. Supporting you, not controlling you. Loving you, not owning you." I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything yet. Think about it. Tour the Copenhagen office. Consider what you actually want for your life, not just your career. He pulled me close, arms wrapping around me in a hug that felt like safety. "I've spent the last year proving I can change. Now I need you to trust that change is permanent." I did tour the Copenhagen office, met with the managing director, learned about their client portfolio, understood the opportunities available. It was excellent. Not quite the prestige of Stockholm, but solid, with room for growth and advancement. I also met with my thesis advisor, discussed my options honestly. Professor Anderson had been mentoring me for 2 years and knew my career goals intimately. "What does your gut say?" she asked over coffee in her office. "That Copenhagen is the smart choice. That choosing a man over my career is exactly the kind of mistake I promised myself I'd never make again." "Is that what you'd be doing? Choosing him over your career?" "Isn't it?" She smiled slightly. "Luna, you're one of my best students. You're going to be successful wherever you land. Stockholm, Copenhagen, anywhere you choose. The question isn't which position is better for your career. It's which choice allows you to build the life you actually want to live. I want both. I want the prestigious job and the man and the perfect future where nothing has to be sacrificed. That's not how life works, unfortunately. We all make trade-offs. The question is which trade-offs you can live with." She refilled our coffee. What would you regret more? Taking a slightly less prestigious position to stay with someone you love, or taking the perfect job and losing him? Habris, that was the question, wasn't it? I spent a week thinking, weighing options, making lists of pros and cons that didn't actually help because this wasn't a logical decision. It was an emotional one, and those didn't fit neatly into spreadsheets. On a Tuesday evening in late September, I found Stellan in his study, working late on something that had him frowning at his computer. I knocked, respecting the boundaries we'd established, and he looked up immediately. Hey, everything okay? I made a decision. I came into the room, closing the door behind me. About Stockholm. His expression went carefully neutral. Okay. I'm turning it down. I'm taking the Copenhagen position and staying here. Before he could react, I held up a hand. But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me, for the life I want to build, which happens to include you. This is my choice, and I'm owning it. Relief flooded his face. Okay, yes, whatever terms you want, I accept them. I'm not finished. I sat on the edge of his desk, looking down at him. I want the farmhouse, but I want my name on the deed too, 50-50 ownership. I want a legal agreement that if we separate, I retain half the property. I'm not going to be financially dependent on you again. Done. I'll have my lawyer draw up the paperwork. And I want a timeline. We date for at least another year before we even discuss marriage. I need to know this stability is permanent, not just the honeymoon phase of reconciliation. Agreed. And therapy. Couples therapy, with Dr. Johansson, or someone she recommends. I want us to have professional support for navigating this. I've already researched therapists. I have 3 names for you to interview if you want. He stood, moving around the desk to stand in front of me. Anything else? Yeah, one more thing. I took a breath, gathering courage. I love you. I didn't want to. I fought it for months. But I do. I love you, Stellan. The version of you that learned and grew and changed. The man who bought a farmhouse because he remembered I liked gardens. The person who goes to therapy and learns to run even though he hates it. That's who I love. Not who you were, but who you're becoming. His eyes went bright with emotion he didn't try to hide. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, you impossible man. I pulled him closer, wrapping my legs around his waist. I love you, and I'm staying, and we're building something new together. Something that doesn't require me to disappear, or you to control everything. He kissed me, deep and claiming, and full of 2 years of longing and hope, and hard-won trust. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. I love you too, he whispered. Never stopped, never will. And I swear to you, Luna, every day I'll prove I deserve this. I'll keep growing, keep changing, keep being someone you can trust. Good, because I have very high standards now, and you've set the bar for yourself. He laughed, the sound full of joy. I wouldn't have it any other way. We moved into the farmhouse that December, after renovations were complete. My name went on the deed as promised, 50-50 ownership legally documented. The Copenhagen office welcomed me for a January start date. Dr. Johansson referred us to a couples therapist who made us work harder than either of us expected. It wasn't perfect. We fought sometimes, about boundaries, about his lingering, controlling tendencies, about my tendency to withdraw instead of communicate when stressed. But we fought fair, with Dr. Bergstrom's tools, and we always came back to center. I started my position in January, throwing myself into work that challenged and excited me. Stellan completed his divestment from the illegitimate businesses, took a financial hit that made me wince, but emerged cleaner and lighter than I'd ever seen him. On Valentine's Day, exactly 2 years after I'd first reached out to him post-divorce, we cooked dinner together in our farmhouse kitchen. The garden outside was dormant, waiting for spring, but we'd planned what we'd plant together when the weather warmed. "I have something for you," Stellan said as we cleaned up after dinner. He looked nervous, which was unusual enough to make me pay attention. "If it's expensive jewelry, it's not." He pulled a small box from his pocket, but it wasn't ring-sized. "Open it." Inside was a key. Plain, simple, house key. "I don't understand. I already have a key to the house." "Not to the house. To me." He took the key out, showing me an inscription I'd missed. "Always yours to keep or leave." So, it's symbolic. A reminder that you're never locked in, never trapped. You can walk away anytime and I'll understand. You have the key to your own freedom. My throat went tight with emotion. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever given me." "Better than expensive jewelry?" "So much better." I kissed him softly. "Though I reserve the right to also accept expensive jewelry in the future if the mood strikes you." "Noted." He pulled me close, swaying slightly to music only he could hear. "Happy Valentine's Day, Luna. Happy anniversary of me finally being brave enough to call you." I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Best decision I've ever made." "Even better than divorcing me?" "That was the second best decision. This is the best one. Choosing to come back, but on my own terms." We stood there in our kitchen, in our house, in the life we'd built together from the ruins of something that hadn't worked. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined at 22. It was better, messy, complicated, real, and it was ours.